Welcome back to Season 3 of ASD Market Week's podcast, Let's Talk a Little Shop. With your host, me, Emilie Lewis. We're going to tackle the hard subjects. So buckle up and get ready for Season 3. We're going to have a lot of fun. Welcome back to another episode of ASD Market Week's podcast, Let's Talk a Little Shop. Today, I am very lucky to have someone who is absolutely going to school me on all things AI. So I've got my smart glasses on. I'm ready to learn. But Mr. Jeremy Bergstein is here, and he is the founder of an agency called The Science Project. And if you haven't heard of The Science Project, let me just list off a few of Jeremy's clients for you. A little known brand called Nike, another brand called Kiehl. Let me see. I'm looking at your website because it was such a long list. Uniqlo, Chanel, Calvin Klein, the Simon Group, Bloomingdale's, Kate Spade. I could keep going on and on and on, Jeremy, because the list of clients that you have worked with is so impressive. But I want to turn it over to you and tell us a little bit about, who you are and what the Science Project is.
Sure. Well, first of all, Emilie, thank you for having me. Truly great to be here. Let's see, Science Project. I used to be a New York City public school teacher, a science teacher. So that's where the Science Project came from.
I love that, by the way. I love that.
Still very much the science teacher, if you got to know me. The Science Project is an agency, and it's a creative and strategy agency that really set out to create conversion-based experiences across the expanded consumer landscape. And what that's meant over the last decade plus is expanding kind of ecosystem. We began as digital first, really understanding how to engage consumers, engage shoppers, engage people in digital spaces. And then we were asked to create interaction and conversion in physical spaces and bridge digital and physical. And that's where we really started to make a name for ourselves. And then as we've started to expand into virtual or mixed reality spaces, how can we take that same discipline around, what is a brand, a product, an event, what makes it special, and how can we get people to interact with it and transact with it in physical, digital, virtual, mixed reality, and a whole variety of these future ecosystems. So
all the worlds we have to live in nowadays. Yeah.
That's right. And, the work that we've done with brands, both, some of the best in the world and some of the most exciting and new in the world, is all very much held to that same standard, as really figuring out what makes a brand really special. What are its distinct characteristics that draw customers, shoppers, people to that experience, and how can we get them to fall in love with it across all these different types of spaces. And, we use technology, we use great design, and use great creative to do that.
You said something that stuck out in my mind, and I'm going to go ahead and tell you, I'm going to steal this because I'm going to utilize it. You said conversion-based creative agency.
Yeah.
I've never heard that. And is there a reason that you combine those words? Because I think conversion-based rings true to one side of your brain, creative rings true to another side, and you're mixing the two. And I love that.
It's a deeper conversation almost, but I've had so many people over the years be like, God, that's amazing. You should use that more often. And I've oftentimes shied away from it because sometimes people just think that you're thinking of a cash register when you say, conversion-based creative, and the creatives really want to hear about this elevated, beautiful, distinct experience, whereas the business people want to hear about conversion-oriented, like funnels and metrics and stuff, and how they come together and how that balance is created can be a challenge. So, yeah, I mean, I use that sometimes, and I should use it more actually. As I've like kind of matured in my career, I've embraced what makes certainly, me and my thinking special. Whereas maybe before I was like just creative or just business. Now, the science project very squarely is in that space of, conversion oriented creative
Yes.
experiences.
I feel like that's the title of a book for you. I'm going to go ahead and say that because as a marketer, good marketers are exactly that. They're
Yeah.
not just creative, they're not just conversion based, cash register to your point. You have to really combine both. And it is a special unicorn, in my opinion, that can do that. So I'm calling it now. That's the title of your whether it's your autobiography or your business book. I love it. And it really rang true to me. So we're going to get into the science project and we're going to get into tapping into your knowledge base of all things digital. But before we do that, I want to get to know Jeremy a little bit better. So if you'll allow me, I'm going to ask maybe some more personal questions. So tell us a little bit about where you grew up, how you grew up, and anything you want to share with us about your childhood.
Sure. Grew up in the suburbs of New York City. Went to college in Oregon, in the outskirts of Portland. Was very much like an outdoor junkie. Went out there to climb rocks, climb mountains, boat rivers, surf as much as I could. So wanted to just see the whole west coast of our amazing country. Lived there, went to school there, lived in Colorado, Vermont, California,
I
all
love
the
it. I love it.
usual suspects. Yeah, and I mean, like, I was an outdoor guide for many years, river guide, and then a guide for Outward Bound, taking youth
Ah,
out.
yeah.
Yeah, rock climbing, boating, canoeing, backpacking. And then that brought me back to New York City to be an environmental science teacher and biology teacher and, science teacher. So for sure.
Did you want to be a teacher at a young age, or was that something that came about later?
Yeah, I mean, as far as being a teacher goes, I just found that I was always like, that was one of my highest functions, was spending time with people, explaining kind of complicated concepts, making them simple, making them fun, making them entertaining, and then guiding them along on a process together. And I think that that's,
Yeah.
that's came from guiding, came from teaching, and that's very much informed how the sort of North Star of my business.
Take us through that journey from being a science teacher to deciding to start a marketing agency. What did that look like?
Oh, wow. I was living in New York City, and unfortunately, teaching high school in New York City is not the easiest thing to do. So I decided to give something else a try. Sometimes
Nice.
regret it, but it's part of, big part of growth, like, my career trajectory.
I am sure there were so many feelings of trepidation, fear, failure, all of the human, emotions that come up. If there's somebody else that's listening that is thinking about a career shift from, one industry that doesn't necessarily seem connected to another industry, what are your, quick piece of advice for them?
Uh, there's, yeah, just do it. Like, there's thinking and then there's doing. Like, you got to get, you always got to stay moving. And any mistakes that I've ever made have always been in the half steps and the hesitations. So you be
That's great.
decisive and do it.
That's great. Well, I can't credit you for the just do it tagline, but that leads me perfectly into my next question because you work with amazing clients, Nike being one. Are there some stories that stick out in your mind that you can share? Obviously, I know there's client confidentiality, but what are some stories that you can share with us about some mistakes in the digital landscape that you've seen clients make?
um,
Too many to share?
Yes, certainly a lot. I think that some of the biggest mistakes, some of the biggest errors and the biggest challenges have been in infrastructure and in foundation. I think that marketing and speaking with customers is sort of built for iteration, is built for trying something out, finding out if it works, if it doesn't work, readjusting and iterating and improving. And that type of communication has existed, predated digital. You would see what worked, see wouldn't work. With digital, um, collecting data, understanding your customers, building that like strong enterprise, that strong business and brand enterprise where you're creating a stack of technology that can that can accommodate data. It can inform you as to what is performing and not performing. So I think the biggest mistakes and errors are sort of made in not building the foundation correctly. There's so many metaphors for sure,
Mhm.
Emilie. Like somebody once described their systems to me like that, elephant that's on top of a stool that's balancing on top of a house that's like juggling, like, and that's how the foundation for their technology was built. And,
Wow.
it's hard to build a business that way. And
Yeah.
that's one of the things I can say, there's good and bad things about an agency, but, being able to go into different customers and different clients and different businesses and assess what their strengths, what their weaknesses are, and be able to build correctly to, capitalize on where they're strong and make recommendations on how to, help them like get away from their weak places, repair them, or just stay away from them. It's certainly one of the things that I think is, most critical with being, being an agency.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. True problem solver. I mean, that in my opinion is what an agency's job is you are coming
Totally.
in and figuring out what puzzle pieces are missing and you're creating solves for those problems that the agency, has an expertise in.
Totally.
I want to switch lanes just a little bit because the past year has most certainly taken a turn towards AI. And AI is always, it's been around for a very long time. However, with the release of Chat GPT, and I think that, it's become commonplace knowledge amongst, everyone from a teacher to a marketer to a real estate agent what AI is. I think it was this term that the technology industry knew for a very long time, was used in Silicon Valley, but now it is in every news article. It is mainstream. You know, bloggers are using it to help them, write their blog posts. Marketers, I know, we use it to help us on different levels. However, there's been a lot of controversy around AI. Just recently in the past few months, we've had big music groups that are suing certain AI companies. We now have an actor strike where part of that conversation and the writer strike, it's all about AI. So, if you don't mind, start with what is AI and what do you feel are some of the advantages of AI and some of the challenges to AI as we see it today?
AI, artificial intelligence, I refer to it as machine learning because it's really like a machine going and processing information and making quote unquote decisions or determinations, through its machine learning. So AI/ML/ machine learning. So it's going and sorting through gargantuan amounts of data really very quickly and making determinations, making decisions based upon that data. So that data can either be, you've heard it referred to as large language models. So it can be written data, it could be code data, it could be visual data, it could be, like I was just on a call earlier, and it was talking about computer vision, right? Computer vision is cameras, like a camera in a phone or a security camera, seeing pictures, millions of pictures, and now that machine learning is sorting through those pictures, and it's learning from the pictures, and it's learning when somebody picks something up and puts it in their purse that, to flag them potentially because they could be stealing something. So it's a machine making determinations, massive amounts of data, but I guess it's learning, I don't, it's still not like, it's not intelligence, it's learning, it's machine learning. So I think that you always have to sort of keep your head on straight with something like this. And right now, I think it just came into a little bit more focus with ChatGPT and with the fact that consumers could now see the power of it, and it's accelerating, incredibly fast. And there's also no, we saw the sort of idea that it is without end, which is, I think, scary for all of us. Like the idea that it's incrementally, it's accelerating really very quickly, but also there was nobody saying like, well, this is the limit of it. Basically, all the messaging that we're hearing is like, this is without limit. So, I think that that's certainly scary for everybody, but having, played with it, in a couple different scenarios, like, there's some good, there's some bad, and there's some really ugly.
How are you utilizing AI?
I mean, there's a couple different tools. There's some tools that we're using. I know that the team is using, some basic AI tools that are embedded in like the creative suites from Adobe and then also from Canva that are just simple, simple tools around image editing, around recommendations, around like copy checking, but they're basic. They're smart and they're fun and they're cool, but they're basic. So there's sort of improved tool sets there. There's also like some ways, some automation that we're recommending for some businesses around their marketing stack that's helping to, make software more software-y. And I say that it's like making software faster, better consolidated process, and, more sort of acute results out of searches and queries and, getting information. And then also, I'm doing a couple projects right now with some companies that are utilizing AI fairly heavily and helping them find use cases in retail, helping them be like, okay, and I think that that's a big thing that we found over the last few years is technology is accelerated and far outpaced the ability to use it. There's like enough technology for, there's so much technology, but actually putting it to use with people, with brands in real situations has, I think, dramatically lagged behind.
Can you give us an example of how someone, client or not, how someone is using it in retail?
Sure. I mean, I'm working with one client who is just trying to create a better checkout experience in their stores, and they want to just create more frictionless checkout. They're always trying to reduce throughput on checkout so people have an easier time, can check out faster. And in this case, they're taking computer vision and using it to identify products, to make sure that some of the qualifiers for, what it is and what the price is, so they're doing it to sort of smooth out the checkout process. So that's an interesting one. There's also some interesting use cases around improving kind of the like product attributes, making products more findable. So if you put something online and you describe it in a certain way, but that's not how people are searching it out and looking for it, it can go out and actively assign more attributes to it to make it more searchable and findable.
Okay.
I thought that was an interesting one. There's another client that I'm working with that is looking to use AI around understanding the client and creating more accurate and more interesting marketing content so that they can go and improve their marketing content. Makes recommendations. There's obviously chatbots and those types of, things as well. But, on the operational side, there's demand forecasts, getting in front of and making predictions around like the ebbs and flows of product demand so you can make sure that your inventory is prepared for it. There's pricing optimization that helps you go out and understand like where you should price your products. So
Yep.
I think there's a whole bunch of interesting use cases that are starting to bubble to the top. And
Yeah. Do you buy into the hype that AI is taking jobs, that marketers, writers, the list goes on, are not going to have a job 10 years from now because of AI?
I think you need to understand it and need to know what it is and what it's capable of. I think you need to also know the process and the steps to prepare your company for it and your job for it. And if you're
Great
caught,
advice.
if you don't understand how you can prepare your job for it and utilize these tools, then you will probably struggle. But I mean, I think it's very much like it's very much the same as just like technology. I mean, I certainly knew, plenty of people who were, stuck in the mud and like, who just didn't want to use technology. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, that's a little bit of the mindset that I have around it is, there is an entire generation that grew up without computers and they had to adapt to computers. They had to adapt to the internet, then to doing business via email. And now we've all adapted post-COVID to doing business via Zoom. This is a new layer to that same conversation that's been happening for
Totally.
decades now. So
Totally. I think you're spot on right there. Is like, it's going to make it faster, more efficient, more targeted,
yeah.
more secure. Like, but those are the same attributes you could have said with, technology 20 years ago. You could have said with, you know, closed circuit television replacing like radios or, so like,
Yeah. Yeah,
so
no one's gonna go to the theater anymore because now there's television,
yeah,
and that didn't happen. So I want to switch a little bit into the science project, and you guys have a statement on your website that you guys are really trying, and I think trying is the word I use. Maybe I should rephrase that because I think you guys are working with some amazing talent. So you're achieving this mixture and combination of the digital and the physical for brands. You're bringing those two worlds together. Talk to me about how that came about, and talk to me about how the two can live together and complement each other and or
sure.
compete if you feel like they compete.
Yeah, I mean there's a lot to talk about there because we've been, doing that for a long time. I mean, just riding off the tail end of what we were talking about with regard to AI and the fact that it's sort of the same but different. Like, and you're very much looking to create contiguous sort of behaviors and like attract and engage customers around those brand attributes, like those emotions, but how they get delivered in a physical space, in a digital space, in a social space, in a virtual space is just slightly different. So
Mhm.
um much like what we were talking about with AI, I try to keep the sort of emotional and behavioral level sort of constant and simple and easy. And I'm like, okay, we're looking to engage and create awareness. How does the brand really stand out, or how does the product stand out, or how does your property or your technology stand out? Well, here's its distinct and its most powerful attributes. Here's how it fits in with a customer's life. How are we going to communicate that in a whole variety of different parts of the ecosystem? And then
Mhm.
how can we track it? How can we make sure it drives ultimately to conversion, which is, data
Mhm.
collection, product engagement, ultimately sale, or, greater average order volume for a visit or revisit, or creating higher lifetime value. So
Mhm.
while we've always been very innovative in how we've created those experiences across these different like pieces of the ecosystem, we try to keep it really simple in that we're trying to use those key brand attributes. It's a relationship with a customer, and then how are we going to engage them? And that, like, we've used some crazy different ways to engage them, but that's just good fun marketing and creative thinking. Like
Tell us the craziest. I want to hear it. The
um,
craziest way that
well, I
you.
mean, the crazy, probably, I mean, we've done a lot of crazy projects. The craziest project was probably the Nestle pillow fight back in the day. We staged a giant Nestle pillow fight in Union Square on National Pillow Fight Day to try to engage younger audiences and expose them, create more awareness around Nestle. But we rigged a whole bunch of pillows with triggers and sensors and accelerometers, the same thing that you get in a phone. And this was early on in sort of like creative technology, kind of the creative technology world. So it was pretty innovative at the time, and it was really when I was like just deep in that stuff, and I loved it. So the
Okay.
team bought a whole bunch of accelerometers and taped them onto the pillows. We dressed, I think, 5 teams up in different like lycra costumes and headbands. And then they went out for a pillow fight. And each time the pillows got swung and they like hit another person, there was a scoreboard on Facebook, and you could track the.
Okay.
So that was
Okay. I was
probably,
wondering, for those of us that didn't know what the accelerometer was, what was the purpose of that? It's the scoreboard. Okay. It was
yeah,
called.
to like it. But my favorite, craziest project was with Lady Gaga and
Oh,
Barney's, and
okay.
doing, the holiday windows, which was our first holiday windows that we had done. And we ended up doing quite a few. We did Barney's, we did Bloomingdale's, we did Saks Fifth Avenue, a couple other, did a lot of stuff with Simon over the years. But with Lady Gaga, it was at the beginning of Twitter, and we wanted you to tell your wildest wishes to Gaga and to Barney's, and to really um, tell your story into the store. And you tweeted into the store, and then it showed up in Lady Gaga's universe on these big beautiful screens, and then
Oh,
Lady Gaga entered into the screens and turned into a unicorn and exploded into a million pieces. So that was, that one
wow.
was probably my favorite of them. And it's it was extremely innovative back then. Now it's, people do stuff like that all the time. But
In terms of digital versus physical, what do you feel is a big mistake that people make when they're thinking about expanding into one or the other side? So maybe they're a strong retail brand that now is adopting digital, or they're a strong digital brand that is now starting to think about retail. What do you see are some of those common mistakes when they try to expand?
I mean, I'll go back to early on our conversation, not building the foundation correctly. Again, like, as an agency, you get to step in and see the strengths and weaknesses of so many different companies and understand quickly where they are. And oftentimes you'll step into digitally native brand that's really strong at data and really strong digitally, but has never set up a store properly and doesn't really, and in their case, they don't know how to build up store operational infrastructure, or, a great brand like Nike that, was just maybe the greatest brand in the world, greatest brand ever, who was like, how are we going to build retail? We're so good at brand right now. How can we make sure that we express the full sort of throttle excitement of what Nike, being a Nike athlete, is in a physical space? So making sure that and they have obviously have been able to do it with flying colors, but I mean, I think that like really understanding that each one of those different ecosystems are slightly different, and they require a new perspective on architecture and how you build them ground up and extend from your business enterprise, I think is super important. So I would say that. And then, also keeping it simple at the same time and making sure that you're delivering the same messaging and the same brand and the same experience across every different touch point. And that is what we did for Nike, is the direct to consumer brand strategy across their global organization, really understanding how they can speak the same language, and and talk to their customer at every different touch point, because people are going to learn about a brand in one place, a product in another, and transact in yet another. So it has to be that consistent experience throughout.
I wonder, with the progression of digital, I wonder if brands feel the pressure. I know consumers feel the pressure, and I'm sure brands do feel the pressure to be the first, the fastest, because digital moves at such a pace that we're all seemingly trying to keep up. So how do you mentor a brand if they build the foundation, but they're just trying to keep up? Do you keep chasing, or do you pick your spot? How does a brand decide that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question, and I guess it's very sort of timely. I've engaged a lot of times now with those longer strategies, with like, here's coming on board, understanding what the strengths, the weaknesses, what the stakeholders are responsible for, what the measures of success are, and then how can we create a roadmap for, listen, you need to have short-term wins and long-term success. So how can we do that all at the same time? So I find myself doing quite a lot of that these days, where I come in and help them put together, that strategy, that plan, and then bring in great teams to hit all of those goals and those roadmaps. So I enjoy stuff like that, because you get to know the organization really well, and the people, and make stuff happen.
As someone who's owned an agency for more than 10 plus years, what do you feel like are some mistakes that you guys have made?
I mean, listen, a lot, it's like, I don't know how vulnerable you want me to get as sort of a business owner, but the idea of hiring people and not firing them fast enough comes to mind. The sort of, classic agency conundrum of not expanding and contracting according to how much work you have, and really, wanting to build a company and not, and, sometimes just having too many people on staff for how much work is in-house at one time, and really struggling with cash flow problems, I think, is one of the things that, sort of pervades throughout an agency, and it kind of degrades the fabric of the business. Like, you'll have, 50 people on staff and enough business for 15 people, and that's fine, because but you have to right size your business to make sure that you're, so I think that, like, operational issues like that. I think early on in my career, I certainly micromanaged
Mm,
too many parts of the business.
yeah.
Is certainly something that also comes to mind. And then, um, also early on in my year, just a lack of, a lack of focus. Like we built
Mm,
and launched some products to varying success. And I think that like you really just have to be very careful with things like that. The greatest thing about an agency is you work on lots of different projects and lots of interesting things. But it can really start to, your focus can be in many different places at once. And you have to, you really have to just make sure you're aware of that and not, and be just an agency person. And it's
yeah.
something that I've recently really kind of re-fallen in love with. I had gone to work for a product company for a while, and they had sort of lured me in there, and I really enjoyed it for a little while to work in house. I've worked also in house for a, a cosmetics brand as well. I like the stability of it, but also, they had trouble with funding and trouble with all, the usual suspects over the last year and a half. And, I realized that what I really, liked was running an agency. And I've recently, it's sort of rekindled my love for just solving problems for brands and creating great experiences for customers. But, that not embracing your strong points and trying to do too much is something that, I feel that I made a lot of mistakes in trying to just be like a pleaser and do too many
Yeah.
things,
Yeah.
all at one time. And as you kind of get older and a little bit more mature, you really realize you just can't
Yes.
do it. So,
Yes. Well, thank you for your honesty. I also personally appreciate the fact that you bring the analytical and the creative sides together, because that's the world that I live in every day. And I really think that that's very important. I wish we had, more people that understood both are equally important, and together they're a superpower. Tell us, a book or a podcast that you've listened to that you feel is just a wealth of knowledge.
I most recently read The Battle of Ink and Ice by my friend Daryl Hartman, who is,
Okay.
like I love nonfiction around explorers and adventurers of the last, of ages past. And Battle of Ink and Ice is about polar explorers and all of this, like, sort of the birth of newspapers
Ah,
and
okay.
yeah, and sensational reports about, exploration, discovery, and how it related back to, um, yeah, how, media and communication sort of grew to support these great explorers that were the sort of heroes of their country back in the, 16, 17, 1800s, 1900s. And I mean, these were great innovators that were innovating in adventures and in innovating in how they traveled to the North Pole. And, so that I loved that book. It was a great one. And there's a podcast. I think it's The Age of Explorers or something, but I love stuff like that, and really kind of reading and hearing about how innovators of times past really kind of persevered.
Once again, I'm hearing the combination of the marketer, the creative, and the teacher all coming together. And it seems like you're finding the content that really mixes those two. Because you're talking about explorers, but you're taking away, business learnings about innovating. So that's really good insight into how your mind works. So I like it.
Yes.
If there's one person right now, currently, that you feel is doing life right or winning at life, who is that?
I mean, my hero is certainly Yvon Chouinard, the inventor of Patagonia. I mean, the guy who
Mhm.
started the brand, who started. I mean, you're in Long Beach, California, so
Yep.
I mean, this is a guy who excelled at adventure, at sports, at like he's put up climbs and ice climbs at the top end of the range, sort of athletically and, in risk. And he's also built just an outstanding brand and business that is, part of the fabric of our culture and is contributory towards, the environment. I mean, who else could have? Nobody comes close as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I do agree with you. Very inspiring and has stayed true to the original vision and mission of that company. Never wavered and never, ever has sacrificed culture for what that company stands for. So that's a great answer. I love it. Well, Jeremy, thank you so much for joining us today. I have side notes about, different digital questions that kept coming to mind that I could ask all day. So, I'll ping you on the side, but thank you so much for joining us today. And I think the takeaway from today, if there's one thing to concentrate on, is strong foundations. Make sure that you have strong foundations for everything that you do, business and personal. So thank you guys for joining us today on ASD Market Week's podcast, Talk a Little Shop. And until next time, keep that foundation strong. Be sure to subscribe to ASD Market Week's Let's Talk a Little Shop, a podcast that can be found on iTunes, Google Play, Amazon, or Spotify. See you there.